They called the cruiser a cathedral of logic. It hung in space like a dark sun, its skin torn and shining with frozen fire. From a distance it looked like the end of a god. Up close it smelled like oil and old smoke. Small human salvage ships moved around it like slow insects. They were quiet. They were careful. Mara watched from the open hatch of the salvage skiff. Her hands were steady. She had been a mechanic on Earth, then a scrounger, then a soldier. Her face was the color of coal dust. Her eyes saw the ship in clear pieces, where a panel had ripped, where a wire still hissed. Around her, the other humans moved with slow purpose. They understood small things. They could fix a hinge with a strip of cloth or read a map drawn in soot. The alien officers had laughed at their first words. At the space court, a delegate had smiled and called Earth primitive. Wood and steel, he said with a soft lip curl. You bring history when we bring tomorrow. The cameras had caught the laugh. The feeds had played it across 10 systems. People who did not know Earth then believed the joke. They still believed it when the cruiser died. Inside the alien cruiser, light walked like a river. The corridors had a slight hum that beat like a slow pulse. Machines sang to each other. Screens blinked in patterns only their kind understood. The humans moved like shadows. They put cloth over sensors. They tied strips of mirror to poles. They used old tricks that men on Earth had used to hide from storms and wolves. Keep your voice down, Mara told them. Listen to the metal. Let it tell you where it will crack. They found a control room with glass like a frozen lake. The panels still glowed with unreadable symbols. A console whispered and then went quiet. The humans did not try to speak its language. They were not clever in the way the aliens were. They were clever in a simpler way. Hadi, a boy who had once mended radios in a village, took a strip of copper and a coil of old wire from his jacket. He tied them to a scrap of paper and blew across it like a player on a reed. The signal was tiny. It was a noise from Earth. It was the sound of a wind whistle made by a child. The cruiser's systems were not built for that sound. They expected clean, precise inputs. They did not expect breath and paper and salt. The ship's internal logic stuttered. A warning blinked. For a moment the machines argued with themselves. Then their eyes turned wrong. Alarms started to sing in thin, alien notes. The crew outside the salvage skiff saw a wing of small drones spin and crash into the cruiser's hull. Sensors misread distance. A targeting suite locked on a dancing reflection and fired where nothing stood. The humans did not shout. They only smiled in a small, private way. They moved deeper and found an archive vault. It looked like a tomb of light. Rows of plates hummed with stored plans. On a pedestal lay a book that should not have mattered. It was a thin packet of paper and thread. The aliens did not use paper anymore. Paper was slow. Paper was human. Inside the packet were diagrams and handwritten notes. Not the polished doctrine their commanders liked to show at courts. These notes smelled of coffee and sweat. They spoke of arrogance, how the aliens believed a perfect machine could see all answers, how they mocked the messiness of survival. One line, smudged with a thumbprint, said, in the alien's own rough human translation, when a mind grows fat on certainty, it forgets how to fear. Mara read the line twice. The salvage team read it and nodded. What the aliens called weakness was a way of thinking. What the humans had called backward was a kind of freedom. They could hide behind mistakes. They could plant an old fear in a new system. Outside, the stars moved like cold beads. The salvage skiff transmitted their find back to Earth with a small burst of encoded light. The message was simple, a manual and a warning. The people on Earth who saw it at first laughed. It was comic, the idea that a scrap of paper could matter. Then the laughter faded. Council members erased their smiles. Commanders read the diagrams until their eyes watered. But the cruiser was not the only corpse in that field. On their screens, Mara's team watched a new set of blips come into range. They were small at first. They were the kind of signature that meant intent. A fleet did not arrive by accident. It arrived because someone had moved the pieces on the board. Hadi's coil whistled again in his pocket. He did not know why he was suddenly nervous. Mara felt it too. She had been calm for many years, but something in her chest tightened. The manual they had taken was proof and promise. It said the galaxy had judged Earth. It said Earth had answered. A recorded voice started to play from an old comm stack they had recovered. It was grainy and flat. The words came with a slow certainty. They mocked us, the voice said, and the voice belonged to a man who had watched too many sunsets and too many wars. They called us primitive. They laughed at our plows and our wood. Let them laugh no more. The hull of the salvage skiff creaked as if in answer. Outside, a new set of blips darkened the screen. They were closer. The smugness of space had shifted. The humans had pulled a thread and begun to unravel a seam. Mara closed the packet and set it in her lap. Her hands did not shake when she reached for the manual. She looked out through the cracked viewport and at the approaching dots. In a simple voice she said to her crew, they should not have left. The nearest blip brightened. It was a ship waking. They called Earth a museum of old tools. They laughed at cloth and copper. They did not see that old things can be sharp. The next part of the war began in small rooms with fires and stubborn hands. The camera of a stolen scout drifted over a row of workshops on a battered carrier. Sparks flew. People bent over tables. There were no polished labs here. There were pots for coffee, bent spoons, and maps pinned with nails. Mara walked between the tables. She moved with the calm of someone who had fixed 1,000 broken things. Around her, veterans sat with children who learned as they worked. The children learned to cut metal and to make a wire sing. Hadi, bring the mirror cloth, Mara said. His fingers were quick. He tied the cloth to a light frame and held it up like a small flag. A boy from the village had taught them how to wrap mirrors so they flash like a lake full of sun. The alien sensors would see the flash and not the thing behind it. It was simple. It was ugly. It worked. The first hook was a test in live space. A human band of small ships pretended to run. They scattered decoys that looked like small fighters. The aliens saw too many targets. Their long-range guns tried to track all of them. One by one their drones locked to the wrong lights. A wing of alien scouts dove toward a mirror field and smashed into each other like birds in a storm. The scene was strange and quick. Humans in the control room cheered in small, careful voices. They did not shout. Victory tasted like hot metal and a tired grin. The lab made things that did not shine in court. They made nets that cut signals, jars that caught sensor beams, and old radios turned into noise machines. Soldiers practiced with puppets and smoke. They learned to move without making the right heartbeat rhythm for alien machines. What the aliens thought was a lack of science became a new kind of science. The humans learned to break the shape of predictability. Raffi, a quiet man with a scar, taught the younger ones to think like a missing tooth, let the machine bite and then slip. He would tap a metal cup with a spoon and say, "The machine hears the cup. Make it hear the wrong cup." They laughed because it was silly. They learned because it was true. News of the tricks spread fast. The galaxy's feeds showed a clip of a swarm of alien drones spiraling into empty space. The alien commanders frowned. Pride became worry. They had not planned for trick light and paper whistles. Their doctrine was clean. It liked machines that obeyed rules. The humans made the rules messy. A meeting in an alien command tower shifted to a new tone. New orders flew out, no more mockery. New doctrine called the human methods contamination. The aliens began to study old Earth war tales. If they could not stop the strange tools, they would adapt machine logic. They designed new filters. They built sensors that looked for human errors instead of human form. They sent a soft voice into space, "We will remove surprise." Mara watched the changes like a slow storm. She sat with an old friend, Lita, who once taught camouflage in low orbit. "We win small fights," Lita said. "But they will learn. Machines can learn fast." Mara nodded. Her face was quiet. She knew each trick had a life. Each trick could stop a drone or light a fuse. The humans moved from tricks to strategy. They taught whole units to think like a broken clock. They trained pilots to fly wrong and engineers to sing wrong. The training was strange. Soldiers walked blindfolded through mock rooms. They practiced with mirrors in the dark and learned to read the small, useless sounds others missed. The young ones cried when the smoke stung their eyes. They laughed when the alien scouts hit chalk dummies and tumbled. Victory came with a cost. A planet-side colony paid for a clever raid with damage to a power ring. A veteran named Nor lost a friend when a decoy caused a misfire. The ship crews kept tight faces. They knew surprises cut both ways. Still, they kept making new tools. They could not stop. The work had become a kind of prayer. Then the report came from a spy on an alien world. The message was small and careful. It said the aliens were building something that was not a weapon in the usual sense. It said they grew power around a living thing, not machines alone, but a city that lived and fed the weapon. The spy's voice trembled in the file. "A living city," Hadi whispered when Mara played the transmission. He had learned to listen for fear. "How do you fight a thing that breathes?" Mara swallowed. The workshops hummed behind her like a dozen small engines. She looked at the mirror cloth hanging by the window and then at a map of the enemy's space. The human victories had taught them to be clever. The spy's message taught them that the enemy was changing too. Machines and cities and life braided into one purpose. Lita closed her eyes. "If that is true," she said, "they do not just want to win. They want to change the rules of life." The carrier turned like a slow ship in a quiet sea. The human crews read the report again. The training rooms emptied into planning halls. New diagrams covered walls. The same hands that had learned to break a sensor now tried to imagine a way to break a living heart without killing the wrong life. Mara felt the air press close. The team had answers for machines. They had stories and smoke and mirrors. They had learned to make small things do big work. But a living city was no small thing. It was a heart that beat with its own reasons. At the edge of the map, a dot brightened. It was not far. The spy said the living city was almost ready. The voice on the file ended with a single line, "They feed it with us." Mara turned off the screen. Her hands moved to her tools as if to steady herself. She did not know how to fight a city that breathed. She only knew what she had always known: the simplest idea could become a weapon, and a weapon could become a story. She looked at Hadi and Lita and said, low and sharp, "We must learn faster than they do." Outside, a small band of mirror cloths wrapped a light like a shy moon. The fleet that watched them would soon learn new patterns. The next lesson would not be about trick mirrors or noise. It would be about what it means to face a machine that lives. The war had stepped into a new room. The door was closing. They thought surprise was their tool. The humans learned to use it. Then the cost of surprise found them at home. A quiet orbit held a ring of habitats. Children ran between solar sails. Mothers hung laundry that shivered like pale flags in microgravity. The settlement was bright with small things: a garden of sprouted tubes, a school with a single faded globe, a market where people traded stories and bread. No one thought war would find this place. Mara was not there that day. She was on a planning deck with maps and coffee stains. But Hadi was working in the settlement's repair bay. He fixed toys and old tools. He made small songs on thin metal for the children. The settlement trusted him. He liked the slow, clean work of mending. Early in the morning, a sensor on the outer ring blinked wrong. It read a shape that did not fit. The alien machines had learned many things. They had learned to look for patterns. They had learned to see the mirror flashes and to ignore them. They had learned to smell the wrong noise and call it false. Now they learned a new trick of their own. Targeting array misread a shadow in the wrong way. It thought a small, safe craft was the center of attack. A blast came with a sound like a struck bell. It hit a solar truss. The ring shivered. Children screamed. Hadi felt the floor tilt under his feet. Glass cracked. A woman nearby caught a child with a single arm. The emergency lights painted every face with sudden orange. The humans had expected losses. They had known that using surprise would bring danger. But this was a different kind of cost. The weapon had not hit a ship in space. It had cut through a place of quiet work. A nursery tank was scarred. A teacher named Noran died holding a scrap of music. A father lost his son who had loved wind chimes made from scrap. Mara arrived by the next shuttle. She walked into the ring with no more armor than a jacket. She smelled smoke and coffee and fear. Her hands moved as if they had always known the work of first aid. She handed out bandages. She helped move the wounded. Her face was flat. Inside her chest a small empty place grew. In the planning halls, commanders argued in loud, sharp bursts. Some said the attacks proved humans must push harder. They wanted to escalate. They wanted to make the alien home burn so others would not die on the rings. Others said the war was turning into something else. Lita spoke softly and her words carried. We used surprise to win. But surprise killed our children. Her voice did not shake. The feeds filled with pictures of torn fabric and small hands. Some of the galaxy's news feeds showed the images with cold interest. Many voices turned toward the humans. Allies asked for rules. Neutral systems sent delegations. A councilman from a small trade world asked, when will your tricks stop being war and become terror? The question pressed like a stone. The human commanders had no easy answer. They had found a way to bend machines with small, ugly things. They had learned to turn pride into error. That learning had saved lives in many fights. But the mirror and noise could also hit the wrong place. The line between clever and cruel had grown thin. Mara sat alone for a while in a dark corner of the medical bay. She looked at the small toys and broken frames. Her hands did not shake but her mind moved fast. She thought of every trick they had used. She thought of Hadi's whistle and of Noran's laugh. She felt the cost settle into her bones. At night, a message arrived on a hidden channel. It was from a spy who had been inside the alien world. The file had the same quiet pulse as the old manual they had recovered. The spy's voice was small. He spoke of a place the humans had only seen in shadows, the living city. It was not a weapon like a gun. It was a place that fed on heat and thought. It grew power by taking small lives fuel from life itself. The city learned like a mind. It could not be tricked by mirrors and whistles alone. Mara played the file twice. She felt the cold of the words. The spy said the city would soon move. It would use the flow of life of people and of systems to feed a new engine. If it woke fully, it could change the map of stars. Plans came quickly after that. Some argued to strike the city in full. Burn it down and stop the engine. Others warned that the city was not only metal. It lived with people. A strike could kill millions who had nothing to do with war. The leaders grew tired. They had maps and numbers and the taste of iron on their tongues. In a small room lined with maps, Mara and Lita stood before a board filled with routes and photos. Hadi leaned against the wall. The three of them had seen the small fights and the costs. They disagreed and they listened. We can win by destroying the city, a young captain said. We remove the heart and the rest will fall. Lita shook her head. If we burn their heart, we burn anything that loves them. We are not better if we do that. Mara studied the lines on the map. She thought of the child who had died holding a chime. She thought of Hadi's hands. She thought of how the human tricks had been born in small rooms with coffee and nails. Her voice was quiet and steady when she spoke. We must go inside, she said. Not to burn. To learn. To see what makes it live. If we can touch the pattern at its root, we can stop it without killing the wrong lives. Some in the room called her soft. Some called her brave. A counselor called the plan impossible. But Mara's words had a shape the others could not ignore. The spy's file had made the choice plain. The city was not a simple machine. To beat it, they needed hands like Hadi's and eyes like Lita's. They needed people who could listen to metal and to music. The commanders gave a small nod. They would form a strike team. Not a team to drop fire from the sky. A team to go inside the living thing and find the pattern that made it hunger. A team that would move like the old scavengers. A team that would carry tools and paper and quiet hands. Hadi felt a cold thrill at the thought. He wanted to shout and he did not. Lita's jaw set. Noor's name hung heavy in the air like a bell. The risk was huge. The reward was the hope that no more nursery tanks would be scarred. Outside the window, the stars kept their slow time. A dot brightened on the map. It was the city's shadow, at last moving. The team had little time. Mara put on her coat and picked up the packet of old notes they kept from the cruiser. She thought of the line that had changed them: when a mind grows fat on certainty, it forgets how to fear. She looked at Hadi and Lita. We go tomorrow, she said. They left the planning hall and walked into the small, cold morning. The settlement rang with the sound of hammers and small prayers. People fixed things to keep living. Children ran with new chimes. War sat at the edge of everything, waiting. The strike team would not be a band of guns. They would be a group of quiet tools and stubborn hands. They would learn to pay the price of surprise with thinking, not with more losing. A message blinked again on the planning board. A name appeared: the city's real code. The map showed a path into its heart. The door to the new room swung slow and heavy. The team had to choose how to open it. They moved like thieves in a sleeping house. The city's skin was cold to the touch. Lights ran under the surface like veins. The strike team rode a small tethered craft down a narrow mouth and into a place that smelled of wet stone and old songs. No guns flared. No engines sang loud. They had come with quiet tools and softer hands. Mara led the line. Her coat was thin under the city's hush. Hadi walked close, his pockets full of coils and mirrors. Lita carried a small scanner that hummed like a moth. Behind them were Rafi and two medics. Each step they took made old metal breathe. The city listened. At first the halls were not strange. Pipes curved like ribs. Lights pulsed like tired hearts. Then the walls began to show images, not screens but threads of light that braided through the air. When the light passed, it left a taste in the mouth, like the memory of rain. The team paused. The threads were not code. They were woven stories, sounds of a child learning to sing, the echo of a chorus under a stone, the quiet counting of days. Lita's scanner climbed and stopped. She breathed out slowly. These are not just power lines, she said. They store feeling. Hadi reached and touched a thread. For a moment the world shifted. He saw a place with low hills and slow rains. He saw hands building a small fire. He blinked and the image was gone, like a page turned. His fingers smelled of soot for a second. It remembers, he said. It keeps what it sees. Rafi frowned. He had spent his life reading patterns in broken machines. He did not like machines that kept ghosts. If it eats feeling, he said, what will it do when it gets more? They came to a wide room. The floor of the room was a map of slow light. In the center stood the generator, a shape like a tree made of glass and wire. It pulsed in slow time. Around it humans and alien shapes moved like slow pieces in a ritual. The team watched from shadow. The city did not guard with guns. It guarded with memory. Threads reached out and brushed faces. The visitors stopped and stood still, held by old songs. A woman with an infant paused near a glowing ribbon and wept, though nothing in the room had hurt her. The generator fed on attention. It took pieces of feeling and folded them into power. Mara felt anger that burned like a small star. She had seen what the city had done, it fed on life and used that hunger as a weapon. But here, in this hall, she also felt something else. The songs were not cruel. They were full of fear and of a long, soft grief. The city had made a kind of shelter from loss. It kept memories because it did not want to lose the ones it loved. Lita stepped forward, but Mara caught her arm. "We learn first," Mara whispered. "We do not burn yet." They moved like ghosts between the living crowd. Hadi held up a small mirror and reflected a thread away from a sleeping child. The mirror broke the braid for a moment and the child blinked free. A woman looked around, confused, and left. The team saw that small breaks could free people. They also saw that the generator had more than light, it had a slow thinking rhythm that changed when they interfered. In the archive chamber, they found plates like those from the cruiser. Only here, the plates were glass and seed, and each held a life. They read translations on a small stolen device. The city's history showed a species that had once bled and starved. They had built the city to remember the lost and to protect the future. At first the city was a refuge. Later, someone found it could take heat and thought and turn them into force. Mara felt strange sympathy. She touched a plate that showed a field of bowed heads and a storm of ash. Her hand trembled. "They did not begin cruel," she said. "They began afraid." Raffi did not answer. He kept his face like stone. "Fear makes strange things," he said. "It feeds faster than reason." The team argued in whispers. Some wanted to disable the generator by breaking its memory plates. Others wanted to plant a code that would teach the city a new rule: do not take life for power. Hadi thought of the coils he wrapped and the whistles he made. "We taught machines to see wrong light," he said. "Maybe we can teach this to feel wrong." They tried a small test. Hadi fed a simple song into a thread, a tune he used to whistle to children on the ring. The song wound through the light and softened it. For a heartbeat the generator's pulse slowed. Faces cleared. A child laughed. The team smiled, relieved. Then something moved in Raffi's hands. He had a small device the commanders had given him, a blunt tool to break what could not be taught. Raffi had his own reasons. He had lost a brother when a living weapon burned a village. He believed destruction was the only honest answer. Under his breath he set the breaker on the nearest plate. Mara did not see his fingers at first. The breaker struck. Glass spidered. Light screamed. A thread snapped. For a second the room felt like a struck bell. People gasped. Then the city reacted as a body reacts to pain. Alarms, not like the thin notes heard in corridors, rose from the generator. The threads that braided memory turned sharp and hot. The floor trembled. The generator's pulse jumped. The images in the plates raced and bled. The team grabbed each other to hold ground. Raffi's face had a look of old anger. He smiled once, a small, hard thing. "We stop it now," he said. But the city did not stop. Instead it answered. Its core brightened so fiercely that the room became a white place without faces. The threads extended like hands and found the strike team. They did not hit with weapons. They hit with a wave of history, a flood of every fear the city held. The team saw raids and famines and the first screams the city had ever stored. The weight of that memory nearly broke them. Mara had trained to carry burden. She wrapped her hands around the edge of the generator and forced her mind to a single idea: the child with the chime, Hati's whistle, Lita's slow breath. She held to small, human things like a rope. The wave passed. Hati fell to his knees. Tears spilled into the dust. Outside, the ship that had carried the tactic team shuddered. In the distance something moved in a way that had been only a tail, a rip in space, like a mouth opening. The generator did not die from the breaker. It answered by reaching through the fabric of space. A thin, black seam appeared and began to widen. Mara looked up with a cold clear fear she had rarely felt. "Stop it," she said, and her voice shook. "Pull back. Now." But the seam did not close. Light from the generator poured into it. The threads tightened like fingers around the world. Far above, the carrier felt the pull. Instruments went wild. The city's song had become a hammer on the sky. Raffi tried to run to the breaker to fix what he had done. Hati grabbed him. "No." Hati cried. "You made it worse." Raffi's jaw worked. He looked at the widening seam and then at the faces in the room. Then he dove toward the generator with a small white flare. He struck the core and the flare burned like a star. The seam answered like a breath held too long. The room filled with a sound that did not belong to any machine. It was the sound of the city waking all the way up. The generator expanded its light into the black seam and the seam widened into a hole that might swallow a moon. Mara felt the ship lift like a pulled thread. She felt the ground leave her feet. She saw Hati's hand reach for her and then the world bucked like a net. The last thing she heard before the lights went wrong was the city's song, louder and older than any choir, and Raffi's voice, small and bitter: "They made us choose." The seam breathed open. The seam opened like a mouth. Light poured out and the carrier groaned. Instruments screamed. Crews braced for the sky to break. Mara felt her world tilt under her feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. The city's song filled the halls and pushed like wind. Raffi's flare burned bright and hot. It cut the room with white heat. For a second the light looked like a sun. Then it tore a piece of the generator free. The seam shivered. Pieces of memory spun loose and floated like slow leaves. Raffi was thrown against a plate. He did not rise. Hati ran to him. He pressed his hands to Raffi's chest. There was no breath for a long, long count. Hati closed his eyes and then he opened them and put his forehead on Raffi's shoulder. The old man's face was empty and quiet. He had given his anger and his choice to stop the city. The team had cost enough to buy a moment. Mara stood with light in her eyes and a new, clear thought in her head. The generator still hummed. The seam had widened but not yet eaten the room. Voices from the carrier said ships were pulling away. The city reached into the sky like a wound. If they did nothing, the seam would grow and eat more worlds. "Listen," Mara said. Her voice was low. The room bent to hear. "We cannot fight this with guns. We learned that. Raffi helped us see that the hard way. We must change what war means." Lita wiped her eyes and set the scanner to a new mode. She had seen the city's threads of feeling. She knew now they could be used for more than power. She could send into them, not a knife, but a mirror of truth. "If we show them what they take," she said, "maybe others will stop them." Mara moved to the archive plates. Her hands were steady. She touched one and felt a sharp memory: a mother calling a name, a field burning, a child's laugh. She thought of Earth and of all the rings where people hung laundry and taught songs to small ones. She thought of Raffi and Noor and every hand that had fixed a toy. She set the plates to a broadcast loop and opened a wide wave to the carrier's transmitters. The message they sent was not a threat. It was a mirror. The archive's light folded the city's own memories into a single stream. It showed how the city began: fear and hunger, the building of refuge, the slow hunger that grew when people fed it pain. It showed faces of those who had loved and who had lost. It played the small, human things the city stored: games, songs, first steps. Mara added a voice, simple words in many languages. "Look," she said. "This is what you take." The broadcast cut across feeds like a cold wind. For a while the galaxy watched without a word. The images were not clean doctrine or battle reports. They were small griefs and small loves. World leaders muttered. Commanders closed their eyes. Ships flew in patterns of confusion. The alien towers saw their own stories and could not only measure them as resources. Somewhere inside their minds a memory that they had used as power became a face. Petitions rose from neutral systems and trade worlds. Delegates who had once laughed now pressed for a pause. The council that once shrugged at primitive things moved to call an emergency. On the carrier, officers argued in sharp voices about law and code and the cost of stopping a living engine. While the broadcast worked at slow pressure, Mara and Lita pushed deeper. Hadi stayed by Rafi's side, but he handed Mara a small coil he had wrapped that morning. "Use this if you can," he said. "It makes small sounds like the ringed children. They remember that sound." Mara took it with fingers that were thin and steady. They found a chamber where the city kept rules, not laws like on paper but patterns it accepted. Lita fed the coil's small song into the threads. The tune bent like soft water through wire. For a moment the generator's pulse softened. Faces broke from their trance. A child laughed. A man looked around as if he had woken from sleep. That weakening was all the council needed. The alien commanders, shocked by the broadcast of their own memories, hesitated. The living city had become a thing the galaxy could see as something more than a weapon. Voices in the council chamber argued not for burning but for a new rule, a law that no living thing could be used as a weapon. They called it, in a dozen languages, the Living Accord. Negotiations moved fast because fear was high and the broadcast had turned pity into pressure. Ceasefires rolled out like tides. The alien towers shut their sensors and opened diplomatic links. The city's pulse slowed to a dim hum. The seam in space did not close at once, but the rush that had fed it ran out. The generator's hunger gave a long, hungry sigh and then calmed. The cost was heavy. Many lives were lost or burned by the seam. Rafi's name would be said in small rooms. Many settlements had scars that would not heal quickly. The generator's plates were cracked and its archive had lost pieces. The living city would not be the same. It would not be trusted again. Mara did not feel victory like a song. She felt a tired, honest thing that sat in the chest when a storm passes. She had learned that war was not only about victory or loss. It was about the rules that lived between people. The humans had used old tricks: mirrors, whistles, simple hands, and those tricks had become a kind of law. You could fight, but not by feeding life to engines. At a council table that smelled of coffee and old paper, Mara spoke. Her voice was small but clear. "We rewrote what war means," she said. "We said, no living thing is a weapon. We must hold that rule with our hands." The Living Accord signed with a tired hand and a heavy heart. It did not fix all things. Old hatreds did not vanish. But it made a new line in the sand. Humans had forced the galaxy to look at itself. They had used the small and slow: a paper packet, a child's whistle, a mirror cloth, and turned cruelty into shame. The carrier lifted into quiet space. Survivors mended and sang and did the slow work of fixing. Hadi put his hand on Rafi's pack and closed his fingers. Lita sat by a window and watched the stars move like cold beads. Mara stood and looked at the ring where children were beginning to hang new chimes. Far beyond, in a dark distance that few maps named, an older ship watched the broadcasts and the treaty. Its hull was scarred in patterns no one on Earth recognized. Inside, a small group sat very still. They had not moved when the war began. They had only listened. Mara did not know that ship. But she felt, in her bones, that their choice would come later. For now, in a small world of coffee and wire and broken toys, humans had done something the galaxy did not expect. They rewrote part of war and, in doing so, saved a child's chime. She walked from the window and took a thin strip of mirror cloth. She tied it to a pole and held it up to the light. It flashed like a small promise.